It's Friday! You are tuned in to Friday Coffee Q&A, where I take questions from Black female founders and I answer them for you. So our first question comes from Asiya07, and she asks, what's your advice for prepping and delivering presentations for introverts? Great question. I have 3 tips for you that I think will make things a whole lot easier for you. And the first one is to let your audience do the warming themselves up, right? And what I mean by that is you can do kind of call and response type things that show up in all of your presentations that allow them to get engaged, right? And warm themselves up so they're not depending on you to make jokes, break the ice, etc. So it could be anything from saying, hey, I want to get to know you, drop your favorite candy in the chat, right? It could be something that I do very often, saying, tell me where you're from, drop it in the chat, right? That gets their fingers moving, that gets them, kind of opening up and surveying who else is in the room, right? You could do things such as saying, if you're with me, drop, say a keyword, right? Drop leverage in the chat, or drop, power in the chat, or power moves in the chat, right? But doing that at the onset of your presentation and then continuing to do that throughout your presentation really keeps your audience engaged without you having to think on your feet and having to crack jokes that you really don't want to crack, right? And just being sure to acknowledge whatever they're putting in the chat as well. Saying, oh, I see you, Crystal from New York, or I love almond joys as well, right? The second tip I have for you is to leverage tech to kind of add some pizzazz to your presentation through surveys, right? So Slido, S-L-I-D-O, is by far the most impressive interactive survey platform that I've seen. They allow you to kind of pre-write your questions, and then you can share a barcode live during the presentation, or you can just share the link, right? The link is usually very straightforward. It's just slido.com, and you can have the password. But it allows you to share your screen and show people's answers live. So a lot of times I'll ask these open-ended questions. Like I did this for a group of young high school students this year, at the top of the year. And I asked the question of, what do you want to be when you grow up, right? And I shared the screen and their answers came up on the screen. And the times that people had the same answer, it would get bigger and bigger and bigger, right? But again, this is great for introverts in that you allow the audience to warm themselves up, right? So Slido.com is super dope. You could just, ask these surveys, pre-populate them right before you show up to the presentation, and then share the results on the screen. But it's really, really cool, and it makes the audience feel seen, right? Valued, respected, etc. You build trust without having to open up in ways that you're not comfortable with, right? And then the third and last thing I would offer as a tip is to really stick to a structure, right? Patterns take the guesswork out of so many things. I give people that I coach and mentor patterns for networking, right? Patterns for launching products, patterns for, creating products. And I would stress to you that you have to have a pattern for the way that you structure your presentation, and stick to that, right? And when you use a certain pattern and you see that that pattern might have been more successful than other things you've tried in the past, then scrap the other stuff you've done and stick to that pattern. So I'll give an example. The way that I typically structure my presentations is that I start with who I care about, right? Because the godfather of networking, to be quite honest, his name is Dr. George Fraser. He hosts the Power Networking Conference every single year, and he has books on networking and all of this stuff. But he says people only care about WIFM. They only listen to WIFM, and that is what's in it for me. And so at the beginning of my presentations, I use that structure where I say, who is this for? Before I start talking about who I am, what I do, what I've done, where I've been, I let them know that they are seen in the right place by having a few slides on who the presentation is for, right? And so I call out their pain points and I say, you're in the right place, I stress their needs, relax, right? I put some pictures up there and I say, you're in the right place, right? That is my structure. I start that way, and then I go into telling them who I am, right? So I share some professional things, I share some life experience things, I share some of my faves, And then I share who I'm doing it for, right? But I start with WIFM, what's in it for me, right? From the point of view of the audience, right? Who it's for. Then I go into myself, who I am. I do an agenda, whatever we're going to be covering. And then I get into the meat of my presentation. And that structure takes the guesswork out of it, because no matter what presentation I'm doing, most of that in the beginning is the same, right? I'm telling the same story about myself, right? Maybe I'm replacing some slides, maybe, not necessarily, because if I'm always talking to the same audience about similar things, then I don't even need to change who this is for. And it's really like the content on the back that I may need to tweak. A lot of times you don't need to do that either. So stick to a pattern, and it takes the guesswork out of it. So hopefully those 3 tips are helpful. Great question, and Godspeed on your journey. And then I have another question. This question is from Joyful Journey 365. She asks, what are your top 3 notes of wisdom for founders starting the first quarter, year 2? So I'm going to take that to mean, you're in your second year of being a founder, and this is your 5th quarter in operation, right? I'm going to answer in that way. So number 1, by this point, if you're in your 5th or starting your 5th quarter of operation, you need to have data, right? The hard part for new entrepreneurs is that they're guessing who their target audience is, right? They're guessing who's going to be most aligned to what they're offering. They're guessing what types of products or services, might really stick for their audience, right? But once you're a year in, you have the luxury of having data. You can look back and see which of your products sold the most. You can look back and see which of your events had the most attendance, right? You can look back and see, where most of your traffic came from, right? A lot of times your email platforms will tell you, whether they came from Instagram or your website, or whether they came from some type of integration where you had events, links to your mailing list, whatever. If you have a business page, right, you can go to Instagram Insights and see, what types of posts got the most engagement in terms of saves and shares and likes and comments, right? When you're in Q5, you have so much data, and what I would stress to you as a top tip is to make time in your busy schedule to analyze the data, because you're gonna move with so much more effectiveness and ROI, return on investment, once you start doing what the data tells you works for your target audience, right? So, in my case, every single Friday, that is management reporting that I am deep diving into the digest that my different tech platforms send me. I'm looking and seeing, how many subscribers I got, how many fell off, which emails they fell off from, which, days got the highest signups, which pages on my website, generated the most leads, all of that good stuff, right? I have a set list of things I review, because the data is important, because the data informs my decision. Like, I'm not having to guess anymore. So I would strongly encourage you to lean into data. And if you don't have a day set aside where you intentionally look at data, all right, add that to your calendar now. Another tip I would give to you is to not grow overconfident in your ability to do it alone, right? So in the beginning, we are scouring the internet, YouTube videos, SBA website, conferences, etc., trying to get a whole bunch of information about how to build our business, right? And then at a certain point, you get a stride, and you start having word of mouth referrals, and you start getting invited to speak on podcasts, etc. And there is a tendency for us to become overconfident in our own ability and isolate ourselves from community, and that is the wrong time to do that, right? Because you don't want to all of a sudden slow down your velocity of scaling, right? Your velocity of learning, your velocity of growing, because you're not on this island where you kind of feel like, I know what I'm doing. Anything, every round needs to go higher, so you need to keep, yourself tapped in with communities, and there are a whole bunch of them. I am a big believer that you should not be a part of just one community. Why? For what, sis? Join all the things and attend them when you can, because there are going to be times in your life where you need different things. You need different levels of expertise. You need funding sometimes. You need partnerships other times, right? You need branding insights other times. Sometimes you need a mastermind group. Sometimes you just need to vent and get perspective from veterans in the game. So as you start Q5, if you have kind of tapered off in the support systems that you are part of, I would encourage you to lean in even more. And there are a ton of communities out there. Blaze has a tribe, and we are super fire. We're always doing things. So pull up for sure. There is Her Sweet Spot, SUITE, Her Sweet Spot. There is Hello Alice. There is Digital Undivided. There is Black Women Talk Tech. There is Black CEO. I mean, there's so many networks out there. There's iPhone Women of Color. I'm part of a lot of these communities, and you should be too, right? And then number 3, and again, I'm assuming that your question, or I'm reading your question as being, you're entering year 2 of running a business, starting Q5. I would really, really encourage you to think about your customer journey and really think through what comes next in the customer journey. So by this point, you would have had at least some clients, right? Even if you're not profitable, even if you still need to refine, what your signature offer looks like, you would have gotten some customers at this point, right? And what you need to do is understand where they entered your funnel, right? So meaning, like, how did they initially find out about you? Is it that you do this event where most people came from? Is it that they're following you on Instagram, or they found out about you from Facebook Live? Whatever, right? But look at the past, look at your historical data, look at your clients, journeys. Figure out where they came in at, right? And then figure out, and this based on just reviewing, right, what's happened in the past. Figure out what they usually purchase first. And maybe it was a lead magnet, maybe it was a download, right? A free download that you have, whatever. Figure out what they purchased first, what price point that was, right? What happened after they finished, what typically happened. Did they reach out to you for one-on-ones after that? Did they join a membership group of yours? After that, did they ask you some questions about a new need that they had, right? Did you have a solution for that need? Did you, typically after a certain service, do you start offering some type of one-on-one help with websites or, photography session, whatever? But figure out that journey. Think back and look at what most people have done. And then what I want you to do is optimize that journey. Meaning, if most people are doing a certain thing, you need to go ahead and automate that. You need to go ahead and expect that to happen. So instead of leading with this thing back here that they don't even get to until 8 months into their relationship with you, don't lead with that, right? Because you're gonna put off a lot of people and miss a whole lot of things. Really work on putting the thing in front of them that typically, right, has the most conversions, right? Bringing them into your funnel. Then after a certain amount of time that makes sense, right? You pitch the thing that people typically buy the first time. And then after a certain amount of time, you have this pre-planned thing where it's gonna push that next thing that they're almost like doing the work of thinking for them, right? Or being a couple of steps ahead of them, not too early, but predefine that funnel. And it is so important if you want to increase your lifetime customer value, right? Or your lifetime value of a customer. What that means is, if you think about an individual, it is the amount of money that you make off that individual over a span of time. In the beginning, I get it. You're thinking about, like, let me make this sale, right? But the truth is, if you really do understand your customer journey and the needs that are going to come up for them, like after they go through the elementary stage of, solving a problem and they're ready for meat and potatoes, can you show up at that point? Do you show up at that point? Do you put that in front of them? Act proactively. And if you do, you increase the lifetime value of that customer, because it's not just one sale. Even if the next one comes in 6 months, you already know it's predefined. So you already have the emails ready to set up for them. You already have a new lead magnet to lead them into this thing. You already have this re-engagement emails that are going to go out, whatever. But you end up increasing the lifetime value of that customer. So instead of one customer maybe, transacting $100 with you and then you never see them again, right? It could be $3,000, right? And 3 people, they have a lifetime customer value of $3,000, it's $9,000, and it'll just exponentially grow. So those are the 3 things I would recommend you start focusing on. All of them being very strategic. As you can tell, I'm really stressing business management, right? Versus working in your business, like working on your business and doing things that give you optimal scale. But I hope that was helpful. So keep these questions coming every Friday, coffee Q&A. Love your questions. And until next time, take it easy. Blaze Business Intensive is the 6-week business management course for Black women. Enroll today by going to blazebusinessintensive.com.